Joining us now is Congressman Ro Khanna, great friend of the show. We are always happy to welcome him.
Always enjoy being on set.
Yeah, we love it.
It's a hit, like I said, with the Capitol Police. In fact, they appreciated my shout-out.
Oh, did they?
Someone stopped me in and said, we're here.
I have a couple comments for the Capitol Police, but we'll keep it cordial, I think, for today. Thank you. We appreciate all of our viewers. Let's put the tweet that you put out on the screen. This was very important. We wanted to talk with you about it. It came immediately after the President Biden ordered strikes on Yemen. You said, quote, "The president needs to come to Congress before launching a strike against Houthis in Yemen, involving us in another Middle East conflict. This is Article 1 of the Constitution. I will stand up for that regardless of whether a Democrat or Republican is in the White House." You clarified that of the War Powers Act, it is clear POTUS may only introduce the U.S. into hostilities after congressional authorization or in a national emergency when the U.S. is under imminent attack. Reporting is not a substitute. This is a retaliatory offensive strike. So, Congressman, first of all, why is this important to you? You were one of maybe, I want to say, maybe a handful who actually spoke out about this, both Democrat and Republican. But why are you not buying the explanation of the administration that this is a defensive covered under the War Powers Act?
Well, this is not a laughing matter. This is a serious thing. I mean, you have the world's strongest, most powerful country bombing one of the world's poorest countries. Now, the Houthis are not good actors. I mean, they're obviously disrupting the ships in the Red Sea, and they certainly committed human rights violations in the war in Yemen. And some folks know that I was very, very involved in Yemen and trying to stop that war. But here's the situation. You've had these reports with the administration from early December. They've been going to the UN. The president's been talking to the leaders of Canada, the leaders of Australia, the leaders of Britain. They can't talk to Congress? I mean, this is not some situation where Houthi is firing at some ship and the president saying, okay, you have a defensive moment and let's attack Houthi or defend our ships. This is a month and a half where they've been making the case. So they need to come to Congress and say why they think that attacking the Houthis will actually make the situation better. So far, it hasn't opened up the Red Sea.
Yeah.
And based on a misreading of the War Powers Resolution, you saw a number of commentators pushing back and saying, well, actually, president can do whatever he wants just as long as he tells Congress within 48 hours. Setting aside the kind of, I don't want to elevate community notes to like a place where we're actually like discussing their opinion as if it has merit. But I'm curious, inside Congress, how fluent are people with the War Powers Resolution? Do they buy that argument, or do members of Congress understand, okay, yes, he actually does need congressional authorization to go to war against other countries?
I think there's a lot of confusion. And unfortunately, the comments were coming from, quote unquote, experts and pundits. And they were saying, oh, Khanna doesn't know what he's talking about. Of course, Bernie Sanders and I are the only two people who've ever passed a War Powers Resolution Act in the history of the United States. There are a lot of things I may not know about. I do know the war powers. And what they were doing is citing the exception. Yes, there's an exception where you can notify Congress within 48 hours if it's imminent self-defense. If the Houthis were shooting at our ships, the president says, no, I've got to have an anti-missile strike or take those out, he can come to Congress. He must come to Congress within 48 hours. That exception doesn't apply when there's not an imminent self-defense national emergency. It's hard for me to understand how they're claiming it's imminent national emergency when they're going to the United Nations and making the case, when they're talking to international leaders. But it's created this sense of confusion. The funniest thing is the biggest request I was getting is, can you text Elon to take community notes off? I was like, just because I've had conversations with Elon, no, I can't text him to have him intervene in community notes.
I would save your text for something far more important. The question I think that it all comes down to is both in terms of law and in terms of strategy. So let's say that they did come to you for authorization. What would your vote have been? Or what questions would you have had for the administration? We had just talked about it in our show earlier. Houthis fired on a U.S.-owned operated vessel. They actually also fired after the strikes on a U.S. Navy vessel. I mean, what do you make then of the fallout of that? And was the Biden administration them grappling with the so-called defensive strike that's supposed to be something that is a deterrent, and yet we've still seen some action afterwards?
Before giving them authorization, and I would have been open to what their strategy is, I would have asked, what is the strategy? Why is this going to be different than 7 years of bombing that the Saudis undertook with the Yemenis? Have they talked to their Gulf allies? Have they talked to UAE? Why is it that there's only one Gulf country, Bahrain, that is on board with this? And I don't doubt that the Houthis are not acting in good faith, but is this going to actually make the Red Sea safer? Is it going to actually have our ships not be disrupted? Because the Houthis just have to have the threat of that, which they've continued, for commercial ships to be avoiding the Red Sea. So you've seen the price of oil increase. You've seen the Red Sea continue to be disrupted. And then the question is, how long does this continue? And I think none of those questions were asked. And that's why you have now this creep towards escalation. Because what are we going to do if Houthi continues to threaten? Now are we going to back away? And we've not pursued a diplomatic regional solution. I would get the Saudis involved. I would get UAE involved. And of course, the elephant in the room is Gaza. And what can we do to de-escalate there?
I did want to get your reaction. One second, Ryan. We were just talking about this morning about a story about 2 U.S. Navy SEALs who were missing in the ocean after a daring raid on a vessel that was Iranian warheads bound for Yemen. So this again falls into my concern. We're talking about actual U.S. service members. What's the authorization here? I haven't seen much outcry reporting. I know you're on the House Armed Services Committee. Have they, given you a briefing or anything? Have you monitored the situation? Because it's a very tragic situation as far as what we know right now. Just want to get your reaction, just because we learned some more of the details this morning.
Well, first of all, my thoughts are with the families of these 2 brave Navy SEALs. I mean, they do extraordinary work for our country, and I hope we start to learn more. But I want to understand exactly what the mission was. I mean, is it interdicting the arms going to the Houthis, which is something that we have done in the past, and maybe the administration strategy could be, well, we want to make sure that the arms aren't getting to the Houthis, and that's one of the reasons they need to come to Congress. The irony with these things is a lot of times they may actually get 300 votes in Congress,
you're so right.
But you're actually going to have a much more unified stance for the other countries. And this argument, well, Congress is so broken, Congress is unpopular, all of that is true. Doesn't mean you could just bypass it. And getting a vote, an up or down vote on a privileged resolution is much easier than getting a budget. And so, in these situations, I actually think it's in the president's strategic interest to come to Congress.
I think you're right.
And if you were following the story of the strikes on Yemen through the mainstream media, I don't think you would really have any idea what was going on. You would assume that this is some kind of just random piracy, basically Somali pirates that have wound up somehow in Yemen, and now we're going to stop them from doing their piracy. Whereas the de facto Yemen government has been very clear that this is in direct response to Israel's attack on Gaza, and that the second that stops, they will lift this blockade. So that brings into question the validity of that argument. And South Africa has brought genocide charges at The Hague. I'm curious if you've read South Africa's charging sheet. Did you watch some of the hearings, either South Africa's prosecution or Israel's defense, and what you make of their claims of that an imminent genocide is being carried out?
Well, I have read parts of it. I haven't read the whole thing. And what I would say is I would describe it as a humanitarian catastrophe. I mean, what you have there in Gaza is 23,000 or so civilians killed, according to the Ministry of Health and other UN reports. Most of those are women and children, almost 40 to 50%. You have 70% of the houses that have been destroyed. And certainly the loss of human life is too much, and we don't have humanitarian aid going in there. It could be a potential starvation. I'll leave it to the legal system and legal experts to figure out what to call it. I call it a humanitarian catastrophe. And my interest is to make sure that all the hostages are released and that we have a ceasefire and humanitarian aid there.
Well, France has said that they also are willing to leave it to the legal process, and if the court rules that it is a genocide, that France will support that ruling. Do you think the United States should do the same, that leave it to the process, and if the court rules, whatever way the court rules, the United States should support that ruling?
Well, I think we have to have our State Department involved. I have respect for the ICJ, but I wouldn't outsource all American foreign policy to the ICJ. So I do think that, but I think our State Department needs to take a hard look at what has gone on, and we need to look at what the legal analysis is. But I think that the issue, in my view, I mean, I let the historians, legal experts figure out the terminology for all this. Right now, it's how do we save lives? How do we stop the bombing? How do we release all the hostages? How do we get humanitarian aid in? And that, to me, should be the focus.
Yeah, well, you called for a ceasefire, and I've done it previously here on the show. I do want to move on to pet topic, a very hard turn, but it's UFOs. I know you've spoken about it. You have received, as I understand it, maybe tell us a little bit about the circumstances of the briefing. Was it in a secure facility or not? Was it classified? You don't have to get into the details necessarily of what you learned. Yeah, you're
I want this to be my last show.
Yeah.
Just he's at an undisclosed location.
One of the things, the process problem that we had heard was that members of Congress were denied a secure, compartmentalized intelligence facility to actually look at information brought by whistleblowers, by David Grush, and by others. Have you been able to receive then a classified briefing specifically about his claims, and to what extent have they been willing to share information with you on the UFO subject?
I've had a classified briefing on the subject of the whistleblower's complaint.
Okay.
It left me with more questions.
Okay.
I have not had a classified briefing on anything about the actual substance of the existence or not of UFOs. But I think that there are more questions that need to be asked about people in general coming forward with whistleblowing complaints.
So my question, it comes down to this, which is that you have been involved now, you're involved in War Powers Resolution and more. On the UFO subject, there's two kind of strains of thought. One is that there's an active cover-up going on by members of Congress and others who are tied to the intelligence community. One is that this is just about lack of transparency for the sake of it, simply because they don't want, who knows what you would learn if we were to continue to push. And then one is that this is all just like bureaucratic snafu and we're overthinking it. In your involvement, on the House Armed Services Committee and more, your general observation, you've always been honest with us in terms of what you think. What do you see when you're with your involvement here on the topic amongst your colleagues? Is there an unwillingness to look at it? Is it disbelief? People just think that this is crank and kind of a crazy subject. Some genuine interest. Like, what's your assessment of the kind of the landscape now that you've at least dipped your toe in a little bit?
Well, first of all, members of Congress are incompetent to keep some kind of secret for more than 2 hours before Ryan Grim will be tweeting about it. I mean, we can't keep a secret about it like if some staff person is leaving our office, let alone a topic like this. But the question is, so I don't think it's the issue of Congress. I mean, Salman Rushdie once said, in democracy, there are no secrets. That applies to Congress. Now, whether there are other agencies that have been fully transparent on the matter, I have more questions. What I don't know, and this is not talking about anything classified, this is just me as a member of Congress and citizen. What I don't know is the reluctance potentially to be fully transparent because there are things, covert operations that look like UFOs, that we are reluctant to share information, or if there's actually any evidence of extraterrestrial life. And I think that has led to a lack of full transparency. What I will say is that there are members on both sides who are now pushing for more transparency. And it could be one of the few things the Oversight Committee actually gets bipartisan consensus over.
How would you describe your position on this question back when you were just a guy, before you came to Congress, just a normal American citizen?
That's a great question, Ryan.
Compared to how you are now, access to classified briefings, though, of course, not access to the kinds of classified briefings that would be at the very, very highest levels. But has there been a shift in your thinking or understanding of this issue?
I think there's been a shift, not because I'm a member of Congress, but I was probably candidly on the more skeptical camp growing up and up till now. And I think it's been more the public reporting of whistleblower complaints, which the public has said. And I mean, these are credible people bringing forth these complaints. And certainly that raises issues that has there been a challenge on transparency? And why is that? And regardless of whether it's actual UFOs or something else, the transparency should be a concern to American citizens.
I've said that. Look, we could be totally wrong. Who knows? It's better to find out rather than to keep it, to be a secret. So there's millions of people who certainly want to look into the subject. We appreciate your joining us and really willing to talk about it, sir. And we always welcome you back. So thank you.
Always enjoy being on.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
We'll see you guys later.
Hey guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.